Hey guys, so I'm going to talk to you today about Six Flags Over Texas. Not so much the theme park, more so all the different countries that have been in control of this area throughout history, starting with Spain. Now, this goes all the way back to 1492, whenever Spain, through King Ferdinand, would actually start to really explore the Americas. They would try and establish a new Spain all the way from up here in Texas, all the way down to South America, covering Mexico, Central America, really a lot of territory. And they would be in control for a really long time, like close to 400 years. Okay, the only other time in that span that someone else would have control would be the French, and that would happen in 1685, whenever France would start to establish territory in South Texas along the border, along the coastline, and eventually that would cause Spain to really start to show more interest, okay? But because even though Texas was part of the Spanish territory, they really didn't do very much with it up until the French kind of started to move into the area. And so when they did that, they were trying to get the French out, right? By the way, that is the second country that's been in control of Texas, was France. So they start trying to get the French out. So they start really showing way more interest. And one of the ways that they did that was by starting missions in Texas, including the Alamo in San Antonio. That's probably the most popular one that exists. But they had those all throughout the state as a way to gain more control over their territory. All right. And this would go on really all the way up until the Texas War, or the Mexican War of Independence against Spain, which would start in 1810. So in 1810, this war with Spain starts. It's going to last 11 years. Okay, by 1821, that war is going to come to an end. It was really heavily influenced by the American Revolution, the French Revolution, all these different countries breaking away from their European roots and from their monarchies, things like that. Would influence Mexico to make this decision, as well as other issues that we're having with equality, Spanish that were from Spain versus people that were born in Mexico, people that were mixed race because they had mixed with the local tribes. There was a lot of inequality within the system that was going on in Mexico. So that a lot of those things played different roles. There's more to it than that, but for the sake of keeping this kind of short, we're not going to go into all of those things. You can cover some of that inside the chapters as well. So Mexico gains its independence in 1821, and now they have all of this territory that they need to put people in. Well, how are they going to do that, right? So they start allowing Anglo-Americans to move into the area of Texas. Now, to do that, they have to follow Mexican laws. They have to convert to Catholicism, which is also an issue because most of the Anglos that move down there are obviously not Catholic. They're from several different faiths. And so immediately, as they start allowing people to move into the Texas territory, there starts to be some conflicts, okay, that would eventually come to a head with the Battle of Gonzales in 1835. So this area, once it got out of the hands of Spain, became highly contested really quickly, okay. Now, 1835, war with Mexico starts. Texas is fighting for its independence from Mexico. By 1836, Texas claims its independence. Mexico does not recognize that independence. Now, the United States does. England does. France does. And Texas is seen as its own country. But they're having economic issues. They're having other issues inside the state as well. It's not going as great as maybe some had hoped whenever they start gaining their independence. So they don't keep it for very long. But in that time frame that they did have it, they even had consulates open overseas. They have one in England. It's a pub now, but the plaque is still out front. So Texas was recognized by major world powers immediately after gaining their independence from Mexico. In 1845, they would join the U.S. But remember, Mexico's not okay with the fact that Texas has become their own country to begin with. So we immediately see, after them joining the United States within a couple years, we see the Texas American, we see the Mexican American War. Now, in the Mexican American War, the U.S. obviously helps Texas out. It does not last very long. And in 1848, through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Texas is again has assurance that it is a state, it is part of the United States, and their land borders that had been contested are really kind of set in place a little bit better. We have the Rio Grande, which is now the border. Before that, it was contested. Other lands up in Oklahoma and things like that were also gained through that treaty. But Texas, again, would only be there for a few years, because 6 years later, in 1861, Texas Congress meets and they vote 166-8 that they're going to leave the United States to join the Confederacy as part of the Confederate States of America. Now, while Texas would not see a lot of the war, Texas would see a lot of influence on that war. Texas was the supply chain for the Confederate troops throughout the South. And they would actually be, at the end of that war, the very last state that would get the news that the war had come to an end. Juneteenth celebration, that's about June 19th. That's when the slaves were finally freed in the state of Texas. That's when we finally got news that the war had come to an end. That's why that's such a massive deal. As soon as the war ends, we enter a period of Reconstruction. Now, even though the war ended around 1865, Texas wouldn't actually become a state again until 1870. So during that Reconstruction period, Texas had to draw up a new constitution. In that new constitution, the only thing that they did was recognize that the slaves had been freed. They did not fully recognize the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And they were not allowed back into the Union as a state until they had done so. So by 1870, Texas had drawn up another constitution, this time fully recognizing the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, kind of the start of civil rights, and they were allowed to enter back into the United States. Now, obviously, there was a lot more work that needed to be done from that point forward, but that's how they got back into the country. Now, from then, there's been other issues and things like that we'll cover throughout the semester. We'll cover throughout the chapters, like Texas's relationship with federalism and the federal government in general. And those are things that we'll get in through more and more throughout the semester. But right now, just the states, just the countries that have covered the state of Texas over the years. So they are Spain, France, Mexico, the Republic of Texas, the Confederate States of America, and the United States, the 6 countries that have ruled over what is now Texas. Now, you do need to do a discussion board over this. That discussion board is going to ask you a very interesting question. It wants to know whether or not you believe that Texas had the ability to continue on as the Republic of Texas. Could they have survived as their own country without joining the Union? At the same time, do you believe that they could survive if they were to become their own country? Again, there's a lot of Texas pride that's built up. A lot of people, even outside of the country when they're traveling, will tell people that they're from Texas before they say they're from the United States. I've traveled extensively. It's completely true. And the crazy thing about it is most people will not question it in other countries. If you say you're from Texas, they kind of already have an idea of where Texas is. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it kind of is. So we have a lot of pride being in Texas. Not everybody, but a lot of us do. Do you believe that we have that ability? Yes or no? Give your reasoning. You're going to do a little bit of research on this, maybe even outside the textbook. But that's your discussion board for this week. Remember, everything is due on Sunday. So get everything in Sunday before the start of the next week. So make sure that you get full credit on everything. All right. Thanks, guys. And I will talk to you again next week.